I've got Joanna Defoe here, and she's from Tracking Canada, or she is Tracking Canada at the climate negotiations with Adopt a Negotiator.
Yep.
Now, that's a bit of a mouthful, Joanna. Can you just explain what that involves? What does Tracking Canada mean?
Sure. It's a bit of an unorthodox role to have. Basically, it's a campaign that was started up by the Global Campaign for Climate Action. And in a nutshell, we're a bunch of young people from different nationalities all around the world. And our job is to go to the climate negotiations and to basically follow the lead negotiator. So in a sense, we're sort of adopting them to make sure that they make sort of wise, responsible decisions that reflect the interests of the country and the young people that they're from.
Okay, but you're not at the negotiations. You're in Sweden.
And currently, I'm actually tracking the Tianjin negotiations remotely. So I spend my days in a coffee shop following the UN live stream.
Okay. And then with this information, what do you do? How do you feed back your anger or happiness or whatever you're learning and picking up?
Yeah, so it's a great way. I mean, the UN is saturated in really technical jargon and acronyms, as I'm sure everyone knows. So what this program allows is for young people to translate what's being negotiated in language that is incredibly real and tangible and visceral. So basically, I get to talk about the negotiations in a way that is sort of open and understandable to the everyday public, and in a way that interests and relates to Canadians.
Okay, well, give me some visceral language on tar sands. Many people want to know what's going on with the tar sands. It seems to be sort of moving in the opposite direction to which we're hoping the world will go. It's very energy intense just to get the tar out of the sand. So what's Canada's position on it?
I mean, the tar sands is ultimately the elephant in the room when it comes to Canada's negotiating position at the climate negotiations. To my knowledge, it's nothing that we've ever spoken about explicitly at the negotiations, but it's that sort of domestic decision-making hot issue that will make or break our ability to step up and lead in the negotiations. So, I mean, it's one of these really, really critical domestic issues that under the current federal government doesn't seem to be standing any chance at changing. What needs to happen very urgently is a phase out of any new approvals for the tar sands, but instead it's such a priority for the government's agenda for sort of energy security or economic growth, even though there's sort of a closing opportunity that we have to jump on the sort of new green economy bandwagon. So I mean, as a young Canadian, I'm following this issue really closely and hoping for change soon.
And how does Canadian opinion react to it? I mean, is it divided, or do most people agree with the government, well, this is a resource, let's get in there and use it and make money and spend it on people, or many people opposed? What is the situation?
I'm a resident of Edmonton in Alberta, so that's a city that's just a few hours south of where the tar sands are located. And I mean, maybe my sort of community is a biased sample selection, but I hang out with pretty ordinary folks. I have access to many sort of Canadians from all walks of life, and what I've seen from all across the country with people I've been speaking to, with communities that live downstream of the tar sands, and with citizens in Alberta, where I'm from, there's a real concern that the tar sands as a political issue in Canada isn't really being disclosed of fully when the government talks about the sort of infinite goodness of the tar sands. I feel like there's sort of growing awareness amongst Canadians that the way that the government is speaking about the tar sands doesn't really reflect the hidden costs in terms of the health costs, in terms of the displacement of Indigenous communities, in terms of its prohibiting role on Canada's leadership in the climate negotiations. And I think everyday Canadians are really waking up to what those costs are.
Seems to be the problem in a microcosm in a way, because many people would say we've got to be looking for alternative energy. Here's a very particularly high carbon emitting source of energy, which is a natural resource. It's a benefit, we presume, to Canada to sell it. And this is it. So how will public opinion be swayed? You've mentioned the sort of downstream communities who are directly affected. So maybe that's not so surprising. They can see the health or the effects on water of this vast mining project. But outside that, are people conscious of the problem, of the benefits and the pitfalls of tar sands? Is the public opinion actually changing?
I mean, I think the best answer to that statement is seen by James Cameron's recent visit to Alberta, the director of Avatar and the Titanic, where he has sort of explicitly sort of stepped out and made a statement in support of the many Albertans that are fighting the tar sands. And to have a sort of Hollywood hero like James Cameron, I believe it's James Cameron, director Cameron,
yeah.
To have someone of his status and profile align himself with the cause for a green, sustainable energy Canada is something that, to me, really indicates a shift in more mainstream perceptions around the tar sands. It's no longer, I mean, I think maybe there was this perception in the mid-90s or late 90s that concerns around the tar sands were maybe a sort of marginal or environmental cause, but now the spheres of influence that the tar sands are having on Alberta and Canada's water, on the health of Canadians, on the prospects for Canada to be a leader on the climate change agenda, I mean, just really makes the advocates for the growth of the tar sands to be the irrational ones, in my opinion. So, yeah, I definitely think we're seeing a more prevalent and mainstream shift in Canadian perceptions. Unfortunately, this just isn't reflected in the federal government policy at the moment.
No, but governments can change as well as policies.
Absolutely.
You've mentioned Canadian leadership. In previous meetings at these negotiations over the last couple of years, a lot of youth groups have got together at the end of a day and voted for the bad guys of the day. And Canada has often seemed to come top of the poll, or bottom, depending which way you look at it. So in some circles here among activists, Canada has a rather bad reputation. And yet you're talking about Canadian leadership in these negotiations and on this issue. So how do you reconcile the two?
I'm of two sides of this issue. I actually don't believe that Canada is just a relentless sore loser in the negotiations. I genuinely, truly believe that Canada has the potential to change its current behavior and its performance in the negotiations and step up as a leader. And I think this is so simply because our track record diplomatically gives us evidence to believe that Canada can, I think Canada will really show its true colors as a leader, as a country that has wealth and opportunity to be innovative and to show ingenuity on climate change. But also, at the same hand, I'm definitely not going to throw away sort of false hope and say that, Canada or lie about Canada's current performance, because by no means, it's quite embarrassing. The public perception of Canada, a recent poll showed that has fallen sort of worldwide. So in terms of the diplomatic perceptions of Canada, it's definitely not something that sort of stands up to our true potential as a country. And by no means, I mean, in the Copenhagen Accord that Canada has formally associated itself coming out of December, we have weakened. So we've gone down from our original Kyoto Protocol targets. I mean, I guess the international legal regime is still unfolding around the climate negotiations, but this breaks our legal agreement under the Kyoto Protocol. So just from that really basic empirical metric of our Kyoto Protocol targets that we've legally aligned ourselves to, and then compare that with the Copenhagen Accords targets that Canada has put out in January, we see that we're definitely deflating and weakening our aspirations on climate change.